I'm excited to welcome everybody to today's Reinvention Virtual Chat. This is number 109. Marian, I am so excited to have you on here. This has been months and months in the making. I think that's an understatement between our schedules. And I'm so delighted. And ever since you and I had a chance to connect and catch up and get to know each other a little better last month, I've been really looking forward to this conversation today. The Reinvention Virtual Chats were created because when I launched my book at the beginning of last year, I couldn't go on book tour. And so I decided to bring the book tour to me. So ever since April of last year, I have been doing Reinvention Virtual Chat events, which feel like a little bit of business therapy, a little bit of personal therapy, inspirational and motivational conversations and content and interviews with some of the most remarkable and fascinating and wonderful people in the world from all walks of life. And I'm just really delighted to have you as a part of all that I'm doing. And we touch people in so many different ways in these conversations. This will live on the website. It's on Facebook Live. We'll take snippets and continue to use some of these incredible words of motivation and inspiration and encouragement for so many people through all of the different mediums that I promote this topic of reinvention. So we're going to start with a little reading from my book. And today I'm going to be reading from chapter 1. I thought this would be a wonderful way to start this conversation with Marian. It is, what is reinvention? Just at its core. Reinvention is a personal intervention with yourself. Reinventions come in all shapes and sizes, but at the heart, it requires taking an honest look at what you want and what you love. What real steps can you take right now to make those things a bigger part of your life? What does that first leap of faith look like? Is it starting that diet you've been putting off, or telling your boss you want to raise, or leaving your job to open that little chocolate store in the middle of Main Street? Maybe you are ready to move on from bad relationship, or start some charity work, or go horseback riding, or meditate every morning for 5 minutes. Sometimes reinventions are big, starting a new career, rebuilding a relationship with a family or a family member or a friend, addressing a substance abuse problem, rediscovering your faith, reconnecting with your partner. Other times they're subtler, revisiting a childhood love of music, playing a bigger role in your spiritual community, making time for a date night with your partner, or in Marian's case, moving to a different city and country over and over and over again, right? Regardless of its size, reinventions have one thing in common. Like an intervention, reinventions can change your life. They can even save your life if you let them. I know what you're thinking. I'm busy. I don't have time to change my life right now. I'll think about it during vacation next summer. Or maybe you never will. There is no single more important task in your life right now than being happy, period. Being happy and being fulfilled will make you a better partner, a better parent, and a better provider than you ever imagined. Nurturing your happiness should be the very first item on your to-do list every day. So what does happiness mean to you? If happiness is the catalyst for your reinvention, you need to understand how you define it and where it fits into your life. This will be your why for every step of your reinvention journey. It will be your holy grail, your goal, your end game, and possibly your ever-shifting finish line as you explore more and more ways to reinvent your life. Some define happiness by their successes in business. Some define it by the love in their lives. Others find it in their family, a healthy lifestyle, their faith, or their friendships. Waking up each day with a sense of joy, purpose, and inspiration can be enough to make you happy. We all have different interpretations at different stages in our lives. Only you can decide what your happiness quotient and scorecard look like. So if reinventing any piece of your life is going to make you happier in any way, shape, or form, allow yourself to get clear on why you need to make some changes, and then you can figure out how. You may be shy, scared, insecure, or uninspired. There could be a million reasons why you're not ready to tackle this important question and shake things up in your life. But imagine Isn't it worth giving your spirit the sense of freedom that comes with making impactful decisions and changes? Freedom unlocks greater control and confidence. It reinforces the fact that you can have what you want in your life and you can be happy. That freedom is your right, your entitlement, and your gift. So I'm going to leave it at that for the moment, because I think that in this conversation today, you are going to find that Marian's story and what she has done with her incredible career and what she has personally endured has like really been an incredible story, and I'm really excited. So for those who don't know, let me just share a little bit about Marian, and then we're going to dive into our chat. Marian Salzman heads Global Communications at Philip Morris International, also known as PMI, where she's helping the company to fulfill its mission of delivering a smoke-free future. She's been named one of the world's top 5 trend spotters and is among the most awarded communications executives. Throughout her career, she's been at the leading edge of the rapid revolution in technology and social change. She co-founded the first online market research company a quarter century ago and remains a go-to source on trends emerging in the digital space. She joined PMI in 2018 after a decade as CEO of Havas PR North America and Havas PR Global Collective, 30 plus markets. In 2003, she introduced the world to metrosexuality and was later a driving voice in the concepts of local as the new global and chaos as the new normal. She's the author or co-author of 16 books. Oh my God, like the thought of that just like sends me reeling, including Buzz, the first big business book on viral marketing, and Agile PR, expert messaging in a hyper-connected, always-on world. Her newest book, The New Megatrends, Seen Clearly in the Age of Disruption, will be published by Crown in 2022. I hope to have you back on again when that comes out and we can talk all about that. And we'll do something on the podcast when we do that as well. That'd be really fun.
Great, thank
you.
you.
Marian, thank you so much for being here today, for being a part of the Reinvention Virtual Chat, for joining our audiences that are here and in other mediums that will be tuning into this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's going to be fun.
I know. And I thought, because when we first spoke, you were in London, where you're currently living and working. And I thought I was going to be getting you up, in late wee hours of the night doing this with us. So I'm glad to hear that you're actually local to the US. You're in Connecticut, so the time zone is not as bad. We've got some other East Coasters on here always. So I'm thrilled. So you and I had a wonderful chat couple weeks back and got to know each other, and you shared with me so many different parts of your world and your life, and you're living in one of my favorite places in the world, but maybe I saw it through very different eyes as a 14-year-old as opposed to what you're experiencing at the moment. Why don't you share a little bit about where you're at in your life right now, both physically, sort of where you're living, what you're doing, and then I want to take you back in time a little bit.
Well, right now, I'd say I live in the cloud. I say that sarcastically, but because it almost doesn't matter where I live, because I live through this machine we're talking on now. I live through these 2 smartphones that sit adjacent to me. And I'm pretty much like most people since COVID, occasionally going to the office, but still managing to clock probably 14, 15-hour work days. And so everything in my life appears to have some level of a screen protector. So what do I mean by that? When I get onto an airplane to fly home, you put the thing on your face, you're protected. So I feel like everything is through this layer, which is bad for a lot of people. For me, I found it super invigorating because it's given me more quiet time than I've had really in the last 30 years. The actual ability to escape into my own head. So in many ways, look, I like being at home. I like being where my family is, but I found real, it's crazy what I'm going to say. I found real comfort in all of these quarantines I went through. So every time I went home during COVID, it was between 7 and 14 days of quarantine. Every time I went back to Europe, it was 10 days of quarantine. And so I've read more books, watched more documentaries. I've completed 6 courses towards a master's degree in government, Johns Hopkins. I finished
Wow.
at least finally the first draft of that endless book on chaos and all the other mega trends that are reshaping our world. And it's probably been the most interesting time in my life. I think I mentioned to you in the middle of it, I also had a brain tumor removed. But maybe more significantly than
we're
that.
going to come back to that because we don't gloss over a statement like that, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to gloss over the part that made me sort of so I found out that I had my brain tumor was back in December of 2019. COVID kicked in. So my doctor and I agreed, I'm a 3rd-time brain tumor person. So my doctor and I agreed to come back in 90 days, be rescanned. And if I needed surgery, we would schedule it. Well, 90 days later, you couldn't go back anywhere. You couldn't see anyone except for maybe the guy from Amazon that was bringing the deliverables that you needed delivered. So it dragged on until March of 21 when I finally had my surgery, because by now the hospitals had enough oxygen. Believe it or not, brain surgery is deemed elective when you've chosen the date of your surgery. So the date kept being postponed. And because in my normal neurotic state, I would send a confirming note to my surgeon's office saying, this is just to confirm that I've chosen this date. It fell into the category of elective. So I basically went through all this. And I have to say, it's probably been one of the most interesting, productive times of my life, because it just is.
You know, it's fascinating. I think we've all become so accustomed to wearing our masks that sometimes you take it off and you feel very exposed and very naked, because you spend, and if you travel a lot and you're in a lot of group situations and environments. And I kind of think about that just kind of when you said that before about, like, it may sound crazy, but, you know, I sort of enjoyed a certain part of having that downtime. I think there's sort of these moments where we're realizing that there have been some silver linings, and of course not for all, and for many it's been more, you know, more the other. But it's, you know, this moment of pause, this moment of ability to reflect, of the ability to consume education, classes, courses, content, read more books, contemplate our lives. There is something that has been a bit of a gift to all of us. And, you know, it's sad that it takes sometimes like a life altering moment, whether it be in your case, you know, something that really affects your health so dramatically, or in the world's case, a global pandemic. But I speak so much in my book and the topic around reinvention of the need to stop and listen to ourselves sometimes, and the need to pause and just reflect on where we're at and who we are, and are we still in there? So that kind of takes me back to the question of, who was little Marian? And when you were a young gal, a young lady, whether it was 5, 12, 15, 20, did you envision what it was that you might be wanting to do with your life when you grew up? And are you doing anything remotely close to that?
There's one aspect of my life I did envision, and that was I envisioned I would not be domesticated, meaning I wouldn't be a suburban mom in a US northeastern suburb. My attitude was I was going to get as far away from what I had grown up doing, which there's quite a bit of irony to that, in that when I am back in the US, yeah, admittedly, I'm in a beach community, but I am in what you would probably label as a suburb of New York City. But I definitely saw myself as a world traveler. I didn't have any specific idea how I was going to get to be this world traveler. I just simply envisioned myself traveling. I certainly didn't envision that, you know, in the year leading up to COVID, I was everywhere from Australia to Kazakhstan to Germany to Korea to Japan a couple of times. I didn't envision maybe that level of travel, but I certainly didn't see myself in any kind of soccer mom style life. And I would say for only 1 year, my partner went back to law school to get his PhD at the age of 48. His youngest son decided to stay at home with me. So for 1 year, I was the worst single parent on the face of the planet. I mean, the principal would say to me, he's not at school. And I would say, well, that's ridiculous. I saw him get on the school. So nothing I envisioned came to be, everything I wanted came to pass. I think a lot of it's because I'm someone who puts a great value in the journey. I don't really worry very much about the destination.
I love that.
I'm much more interested in tomorrow and the day after tomorrow and enjoying this afternoon than I'm going to worry about what's going to happen on the 26th of December.
Right. That's fantastic. I just love that. It's so funny. I was literally driving and I could read to you in my calendar something that I wrote just yesterday about that. I'm going to indulge in that for a moment, if I may, because it is readily here. I mean, literally, I wrote this yesterday afternoon as I was driving. I wrote, and I was like, oh, I'm going to give this to the team. We have to turn this into a social media post. I am all about the journey. I even noticed that when I drive somewhere, I tend to take the scenic route rather than the shortcut and the back roads that will get me somewhere faster. I'm curious to see and know what is going on in my city, around me, what people, hang on, what else did I write? But you get the gist. But I just love that you said that, because I feel like we need to be in that moment. We need to be in the moment of the journey. We need to be appreciative of where we are and what we do and don't have around us. And it's so extraordinary. As I talk about reinvention, it's that, you know, what makes you happy? What are you striving for? It could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 years, but you can do that and be in the moment and really appreciate where you are. I mean, Marian, you had some serious life-threatening moments with your 3 instances. Can we talk about that for a moment?
But I have to preface it with, I never saw them as life-threatening moments. I saw
Which is
them as
more incredible.
I saw them as interesting situations. The last one was almost, this is going to sound ridiculous because you had to bring, so I do my surgeries within the Mass General Brigham and Women's system. So I had to bring myself to Boston because of COVID. No one could come with me. When it was time to leave, I was able to call Jim and say, you can come pick me up. But I was there all by myself, and it was perfectly okay. It was just interesting. I mean, didn't stay for very long because they want to rush you out of the hospital because of COVID. I was there for 36 hours in totality. The most extraordinary gift was given to me, and it happened after I was under anesthesia, so I've never been able to thank the person, but my hair was all cornrowed. So as a consequence, they had barely had to shave my head. So when I came out of this surgery, even though I have 60 staples and 80 pins or something in this side of my head, my hair was all cornrowed. And so it covered it up. So I never looked ill. And then they give you so many steroids when you get out of the hospital that for the first week and a half, I was like this alpine hiker in Boston. I kept saying, let's walk further. Let's go further. I mean, I was back at a Pilates class after 10 days. Admittedly, the Pilates instructor was scared to death because I kept saying, I can't put my head down. Just be careful. But so I'm not someone who, you know, look, they give you the stats. There's an X percentage chance you're not going to make it. There's a Y percentage chance you're going to be paralyzed. I must have not even taken it seriously. I didn't write down all my passwords.
You're like, I don't have time for this. I didn't write down my passwords.
It was less about not having time. It was more like, look, I get on the airplane many times a month. I never jump into the front of the plane and tell the pilot what to do. You find the best neurosurgeon. You trust that person. You read what you need to read to understand that you shouldn't eat a bagel before surgery. And when you come out of surgery, you're probably going to really need to heavy up on waters. But I didn't dwell in, I mean, I've never really watched any of these surgeries online.
It was like ignorance was almost bliss, right?
Let's just put it this way. I'm a managed ignorant. Because if it was another topic, if I was planning on adopting a dog, the degree of research I would do would torture the entire family. I want to know where we're going to get him from. I want to be absolutely sure he's a rescue. I want to be sure I would torture everyone. Then I would torture the vet to be sure he had the right shots. When it came to myself, I was like, oh, I guess I better pack some sweatpants. I mean, I had this complete disassociation from anything negative. And I just saw this as another step because whoever I emerged from the surgery, that was the person I was going to have to be.
You know, you said to me that you learned something when you were in there as a patient. It was a very big takeaway, which clearly applies to life as well. But in the moment, I don't know if you recall what I'm specifically referring to, but do you want
Was
me to
it was it about the fact that you are, there's probably two things I would have said. Number one, you are the general contractor of your own health. And number two, your manners and how you treat others
Yes.
Have an absolute correlation to your experience. I'm a former waitress. So as an undergraduate, as a graduate student, I was a terrible waitress who did phenomenally well because I would manage the expectations of the people sitting. I would immediately go to the table. I would apologize to you that I'm your server for tonight. Bear with me. I'm doing the best I can. And if you just got your dinner and it wasn't all over your beautiful outfit, you were sort of grateful to me because I had. So as a patient, I quickly learned the most important thing you can do is bring snacks for the people that you're going to be dealing with. So I don't travel with a lot of clothes. I don't travel with a lot of hair care products. And I've had enough surgeries to know those things don't matter. I do travel with, okay, my dogs, thank you.
Okay, I do to chime in.
I do travel with chocolates for nurses. I do travel with things like that because look, these people are having a much rougher day than I was. I was lying there prone with a little bit of a drip. I mean, they don't give you hard drugs anymore, even for brain surgery, but with enough of a drip that I was coping. These poor people were dealing in a COVID environment with very sick people. The last thing they needed was somebody who was going to moan and complain. A little bit of please and thank you go just such a long way to make people feel better.
And I think that applies in everyday life. I mean, the difference in speaking nicely to a waiter in a restaurant, to the gas station attendant, the people that are in service of us in so many different ways. And, there's nothing nicer when, how many times do you said to a waiter, they come up to the table, they go, how are you doing today? And you actually look up at them and you look them in the eyes and you go, I'm doing great. How are you doing today? And they're like, thank you so much for asking. Like, it feels like, is that just not who we should be as human beings to one another? So I think it's a sentiment that bears repeating over and over again till it's no longer an oddity to treat each other and be that way to one another. And I just, when you and I talked about that and you said it was just such an incredible sort of takeaway from your experience, and it's just a small but subtle and important thing. And I mean, here you manage hundreds of people in your daily life of what you do at PMI. It just comes into play in every different way. And speaking of which, as I sort of segue into PMI, such an interesting thing that you shared with me, that you are working for a company, Philip Morris, who's been known forever because of the cigarette business and its claim to fame. And yet you were someone who took the incredible years of history and experience in your industry with the agencies, building brands in marketing and communications. And when you were given this opportunity to come work with PMI, why don't you talk a little bit about what that meant to you? And given the fact that you smoked 2 cigarettes your entire life?
My 2 cigarettes in my entire life.
You're like, yeah, I'm really not a smoker, but how did you kind of reconcile this?
I'm a never smoker. My dad died from lung cancer, so I'm totally against smoking combustible cigarettes. When they first phoned me, it was Heidrick & Struggles, the executive search firm. I loved the woman who was calling me, but I was like, I think she's lost her mind. What is she calling me for this job for? And I agreed begrudgingly to at least go and meet them. And I looked at the website and I was like, you know what, the first thing you better practice is do your homework before you say anything stupid, because I had no clue. Number one, we do not sell any cigarettes in the US and have never sold cigarettes in the US. That's actually a company called Altria, with whom we share a common name. They do call themselves Philip Morris USA. Number two, the entire commitment of the company was to move towards a smoke-free future. And as I started to learn more and more, it reminded me that there's 2 ways to exact great change in society. One is to work on the outside and throw bombs. And look, I've done that, where you protest and and the other is to work on the inside to try to make things better and to give people better information. And sort of my greatest pride in my almost 4 years at PMI is really our Unsmoke campaign, which starts off with a really important triplet. If you don't smoke, don't start. If you smoke, quit. if you won't quit change. And it's only if you won't quit that you should then change to products that are less harmful. And so, and look, being there hasn't changed my position on combustible cigarettes. In fact, it's changed something else. It's changed my position on fireplaces. So I've learned so much about combustion that I now know that burning a fire, burning candles, some of these things aren't really good for you. So
Is it
actually,
the carcinogens in them?
it's the burning.
Yeah, okay.
We're probably both. I should be careful because when we get to the hardcore science, it's not my specialty, but it's the burn. The burn is not good. Whether even barbecuing,
right.
All this stuff that burns is just not good for you. It's not good to be around. So it's changed my attitude towards fireplaces, which used to be something I loved. There used to be nothing better than a Saturday with a blanket, a dog, something great on television, and a fireplace. And now it's like I've banned this fireplace, just like other people have banned smoking.
Right. But you also said something, and I think it must have been at that point when you were deciding whether or not you wanted to take on this role. And you said that you would rather change the world from the inside versus, being an activist on the outside.
I felt that I was going to be more likely to be able to change the world from the inside because I would have access to the resources and access to the decision makers. On the outside, I would just be another voice arguing for change. And I know, look, not everyone agrees with me. I've been deeply criticized. People said, you've thrown away your career, you've thrown away your reputation, but I had to do what I believed in. Look, it was this development of considering this. I had a job I loved. I loved running Havas. I'd been in the exact same role for the 9 years. I wasn't going anywhere in my own mind. I talked to Philip Morris from middle or end of summer of 17. I accepted the job in early January of 18. I moved to headquarters in Switzerland in spring, in April, to be specific, in April of 18. It's not something I've ever regretted. I've regretted that I didn't come sooner and couldn't have been part of the bigger change. The Smoke-Free Future Party had already been announced before I got there. It was my opportunity to make it more business friendly, more regulator friendly, more consumer friendly. I think I would have liked to have been there to have experienced the transformation at the first stage. I'm sort of stage 2 of transformation, just because watching people have to flip the switch on what they believe is just so intriguing to me.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. I mean, look, the psychology of change, and we deal with this in this conversation around reinvention every day. People, whether it's a business, whether it's people on a personal level, the fear, the risk, what will the reward be, the unknown. These are things that, we deal with on an individual level every day, let alone big companies. And it feels like you're shifting a Titanic around when change is afoot. So I'd love to know, like, when you personally see that sort of opportunity for change, is it fear that, creeps in? Is it adventure? I look at change, I'm like, oh, what an adventure, how fun. Let's figure this out, problem solution, let's tackle this, but a lot of people see change and they run for the hills, and it's like, no. And, you want to climb under the blanket and kind of hide for a while.
I'm quite different. To me, change is simply normal. I expect everything to be different tomorrow than it is today. I expect to be confronted with a different set of situations, a different set of expectations. It's just normal. I mean, I have a very different way of internalizing it and coping with it. And I always just allow myself what I always refer to as, if things just become overwhelming, I make an 8-hour date with a duvet. And I feel that after this 8-hour date with the duvet, I've kind of recast my mindset and I can face whatever it is. Because look, terrible things happen to good people, terrible things happen to terrible people. I see the last 2 years with extraordinary gratitude. I didn't work on the front line. I did end up having access to my brain surgeon. I kept my job through the whole period of time. We had great results in unsmoking people. I mean, so how am I supposed to complain about any of this? It's just that every day somebody threw a different set of balls at me. Some of them I dropped, most of them I caught, some of them I threw back, and it just is. So I don't worry about change. I know I look forward to what I think of as the next chapter in my life. So when I took the job, I took the job with an expectation if I came and I would be effective, I would stay for 5 years. It's almost 4 years now. I think I'll probably stay a little bit longer. But then I joke, I have two different things I say I might do next. One is I might become the most awesome tennis player in the whole world, and
I'll
be
come
obsessed
join you.
with that. And the other I say
play 4 times a week. So you come out here to California, you're on.
right now I dream of playing 1 time a month. Or the other thing I might decide to do is go to law school and become a divorce lawyer.
Wow.
And it's because I'm completely addicted to divorce television. So I watch all of this really terrible, terrible TV. And you can't get great TV when you're in Europe to begin with, even with all your satellite, whatever, but I can still get divorce court. And I constantly feel like somebody isn't getting well represented. So I don't know if I can really go through being a 1L. My husband teaches 1Ls right now, and I watch the pain and suffering. I watched even more during the year of COVID when I heard him lecturing every day, open your page, Miss So-and-so, whatever, Mr. So-and-so. But so I don't know, either I'm going to become an ancient tennis person or I'm going to go to law school.
I love that. What very diverse, or both, I mean, look, we talk about reinvention. Anything is possible, and we're never too old for anything. So, I like to think that we may not, if we want to be, if we're into music and play the guitar, you may not be the next Mick Jagger, but doesn't mean, you can't be, our Jimmy Connors and John McEnroes and Chris Everett's and Yvonne Goolagong's, but you could certainly play. I mean, that's my joy for me, was getting back on the court about 5 or 6 years ago. And now the fact that that is my happy place 3-4 times a week is extraordinary to have in my life. So, I definitely support that idea. You also shared with me some just sort of really, I think, what I call special takeaways in life. One of them was always be learning. And there are a few here that I'm going to kind of read back to you that we talked about, because I just love where you went with them. So maybe expand on that, just what that means to you and what the opportunity for all of us is and why.
So I am obsessed with studenting, the art and science and the rigor of going to school. For 30 odd years, I hadn't done anything any more serious than whatever kind of executive leadership course you would go on every now and then through your employer. And as I began to get more and more into my job at Philip Morris, I realized how little I understood about how government works. And so I was accepted at and began graduate study at Johns Hopkins to do a master's in government that I do remotely. And the first thing I found out was everything I learned in school in the late 70s and early 80s, a lot of it wasn't right. A lot of it had been updated. Much of it needed to be reconsidered. And I had no clue how to do electronic footnoting. So every aspect of school, and I have to say that I called young family members and they were really horrible to me. I would call and say, I have no clue how to do this. I'm not sure. And they would say, watch a YouTube video. Like the most unsupportive people I could have possibly consulted. Like, why are you asking me this? Go and check it out on YouTube. So my current book that I literally just finished after working on it for 1.5 years, just finished the first draft, submitted it to Crown on Sunday morning. It's the first time when I can actually tell you that at least all my footnotes are electronically correct. Now they're not Chicago style, so I'm gonna have a whole relearning experience when they send me back that feedback. But yeah, the idea of constantly learning and keeping your brain alive and staying in the know is so critical, because otherwise you start to get stale. And I realized there were parts of what I thought even about being a citizen that had gotten very stale. I mean, I thought I knew everything because I watched a lot of CNN. And, I'd rotate occasionally to MSNBC, or I'd even occasionally check out Fox. I would watch the BBC. I would sometimes, a friend of mine in Europe got me into watching some Russian English language news, but I didn't know important things like the historical documents on which I guess I learned it once and it had sort of slipped through the cracks
Right.
in my brain.
Right.
And so it was wonderful to be able to go back. And the other part about school that was so wonderful was it forced me to have a discipline. I'd have to watch, my lectures would go live on Sunday at midnight. And obviously I had a time difference, both positively and negatively. It meant I had to watch my lecture on Monday after work, no matter what time I got home. Sometimes I would be watching lectures till 2 a.m.
Yeah.
It meant I had to start my assignments on Tuesday and go Tuesday to Thursday for one class, and then start the same rigor Thursday night for the class that I would then finish on Saturday night. And here's the crazy thing, as someone who's obviously, look, I've spoken all around the world, I've presented to everyone. Can I tell you how nerve-wracking it is to have to present to a professor via Zoom? And like, also, it's like the middle of the night in Europe.
Funny.
It's the middle of the night in Europe, and I'm like, what do I wear? Because like we've become slovenly over COVID. I mean,
right.
Like I was like, do I actually put on business clothing? Do I pretend that this is a real present? Like it was such a great learning experience, and so forced me into this, like, it gave me plenty of things to worry about that weren't high risk worries. Like, what do I wear? Do you put lipstick on? Like, do you send a thank you note after? Like, all crazy stuff.
Which is, you're right, it's funny coming from you, because I can only imagine the clients, the senior level sweet executives, all the important people you've been in rooms with, and the fact that a professor makes you sort of question is so precious. It's so cute. And I love that.
The other thing that was kind of fun was, here I work in and around so many top level lobbyists, but one of the classes I had the class I had the toughest time with so far of my 6 was actually on lobbying, because I knew how to manage the whole thing. Right. I understood, I thought what they did, but now I have to go in with granularity and actually read case studies, answer questions, and every week do my bloody homework.
Right.
And I felt so bad for my professor, because obviously he knew who I was, because you have to go through your introductory stuff. And I think he felt really,
he probably felt more intimidated by
well,
you.
What I was going to say, I think he felt terrible when, ultimately I did very, very well in the class, but the first midterm, I think I got like a low 80, and I think he felt terrible. He's like, I know you'll get it. And I'm thinking, maybe I won't, but I know I'll die trying. And it was school has been a wonderful thing for me. Studenting is a wonderful thing for everyone.
I love that. When I was working with helping my kids who are now in their early 20s with some of their harder classes when they got older, and one of them was an art history class, and their textbook was what to me felt like a coffee table book, right? Where they had to memorize every artist and everything about that piece of art. I just got to look at the pretty pictures. But it made me think about the beauty of being able to go back to school at a time in your life where you're doing it because you really want to, and you really want to be passionate and be learning, and this, opening conversation of always be learning, I think is precious. I'm such a student of the world. I think that reinvention is all about being curious, wanting to create more of something in your world to make your life more rich. And you said something really interesting when we spoke a few weeks ago, when you said, find wisdom in the negative.
Yeah, this is really important. Like, there's so much bad news out there. There's so much unfortunate stuff. There's so much that could paralyze you. And instead, it sends me on a Google mission. If I see something bad or I read about something bad, right now I'm obsessed, obviously, like most people, with climate change. Instead of, and look, eventually we'll probably go and live in Tucson, Arizona, which is where I consider sort of home. It's a city that's warming the 3rd worst in the US. But instead of it becoming obsessed with the negativity, I do endless amounts of research, and I learn all kinds of minutia. And I sort of feel like knowledge is a little bit of power. Like somehow I'll master this problem. And if I won't, I'll kill myself from exhaustion researching it. So I don't like to dwell in the negative. I'm not someone who would ever post a negative review. Like, if I had a bad experience, I don't think I'd really be quick to share it. if I had a good experience, I would be quick to share. And I think a lot of it is 3 times having a brain tumor and 3 times having a good experience makes me really believe that bad things can end up in a good place.
That's
and I think
amazing.
that's really changed me over, you know, it's more than 15 years of dealing with this.
Yeah,
It's just
I
made
love
me
that.
very different.
I love that. I love that. That's where you can, you know, net out with so much, and such a beautiful takeaway for all of us. And especially as we're getting into this part of our conversation and we're winding up, I have a really fun question to ask you, which I love to ask my guests because I love to see how they're going to answer it. And then we're going to open it up for some questions if anybody has any, and feel free to put in your chat or raise your hand if you do. If you could have a dinner party and have anybody at your table, dead or alive, someone that you feel would just inspire you, impact you, that you want to break bread with, you want to laugh with, you want to know, 3 or 4 people that just come to mind that you just would love to have sitting at that table with you.
So I think for me right now, it would be all the living presidents.
Wow.
I'm not sure I'd invite President Trump. I have to think about that, but I would like to actually have the opportunity to understand the civility between the relationship between President Obama and President Bush and President Clinton. I'm on this quest to understand how we restore civility. And when I think about things that were really civilized, I think about the peaceful transition between prior administrations. And I would just love to understand from them how they did it, why they did it, what motivates them. I've had the luxury quite recently of listening to President Bush talk, and I didn't vote for him. I left there to such an extraordinary fan on a human level of his brain, his integrity.
Exactly.
It just, and his, frankly, his politeness.
Yeah, and I think, well, I think because we may have taken it for granted at the time, as we did with so many, until somebody else came along and, you know, was a very bad example. I shudder for my children to think that they've been exposed to some of the things that they have. And I think that transition is such an incredible point that you make about the civility and the integrity of human beings that are role models, that on so many levels, we as humans, young, old, whatever, want to be able to look up to and learn from. There was a time in our lives where we might have. And I think that's a fascinating perspective for you to recognize that slice of the world, you know?
Well, I think the other part that we forget is that every day is really new history. And I think when we go back to some of those, I mean, sometimes when I've been in quarantine, I've actually gone back and done things like watch Senator Kennedy's funeral, to actually watch how people eulogized him. I did the same thing for the first President Bush. I did the same thing for Senator McCain. So I'm really trying to put my head around where do we stand on civility, because it was such an important dimension of the country I grew up in. And it's something that I feel like is missing right now.
Exactly.
And I feel like I'm a kid on a scavenger hunt. I keep looking for clues. Like,
well, Marian, I have a feeling we know what book number, what will that be, 18? If the new one coming out is 17, it sounds like this could be book number 18.
After I submitted the manuscript, I spoke to the 2 or 3 people that had really helped me work on it. And I have declared that it's like, just like you have a last will and testament, this is like my last book and forever. I mean, now mind you, I said that 10 years ago and stopped.
Right? I'm like, it's like the final lap that, you know, the great athletes do, and all of a sudden you see them come back. I'm just saying, you never know. But I love this conversation. I just love this whole topic, and I wish we had more time, but we'll have to revisit that, because I think I so concur with you on that. And, you know, I grew up, I think, you know, my parents used to call me Pollyanna. Like, I just want everybody to get along and be nice and be happy and be kind. And, you know, I think there are lessons to be learned if we really take a closer look at what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Marian, I want to open this up. If anybody would like to ask a question, take yourself off mute if you'd like and raise your hand or let me know. And Marvin, I would love you to ask a question. So thank you. We need to unmute you. Okay, ask to unmute. There we go. How's that? Did that work? Yes.
Thank you. So I apologize, I'm in a remote area, and who knew that a laundry room would have Wi-Fi?
Well, there you go. One does never cease.
So, there's a will, there's a way. So Marian, other than being incredibly impressed with your story and your journey, if you are not doing stand-up comedy, let Kathi and I book you, please.
I'm totally not funny though. That's the problem.
Oh my God, I haven't stopped laughing. The people in the laundry room think I'm like smoking something and can't figure out what I'm doing anyways. But literally, I haven't stopped laughing the whole time. And you've been through some pretty tragic and, pretty serious things. And your sense of humor is phenomenal.
Thank you.
So that's an offer to book you someplace. But my question is focusing on how much did some of the traumatic things in your life change your moral compass or become a preacher to other people to change their moral compass?
So let me start off by saying, because of the way I've dealt with so many of these things, I don't know that I feel like I've been through much trauma. I think of my brain tumors as unfortunate incidents. And actually, they probably taught me about the kindness of other people. When I had my first brain tumor, someone I didn't know very well, a friend of a friend, interceded and introduced me to a surgeon associated with Mass General who became my base surgeon. People were just so phenomenal. I don't know that I thought of them as traumatic. It certainly taught me the importance of self-reliance, meaning it doesn't matter who loves you, it doesn't matter who's in your family. When you are a patient, if you cannot advocate for yourself, you are really, really in a bad spot. And so it taught me to pull myself out of, like, you might want to go into a funk and feel sorry for yourself. And I caught MRSA after my first tumor. So I was constantly in and out of the hospital with infections. But I knew that if I didn't advocate for myself, it was just going to get worse. So you find this strength maybe that you didn't have before. I mean, I kind of feel like you could face almost anything after a while. So I'd say that really changed. I don't know if moral compass, no. I mean, I think I realized how kind the world can be in some situations, but also how unfair it can be. One of the things that I'm most impacted by is the absolute inequity of medical care. If you don't have great insurance, if you don't have a great network, if you don't know how to do great research, you could end up with very different outcomes than I have with exactly the same conditions.
Unfortunately.
So true.
Major key.
Thank you.
Major key.
Yeah. Josh, did you unmute because you wanted to share or ask or anything? And thanks.
It was crazy because like right in the heat of the conversation when Marian was getting into it, it's like I lost my connection.
And it looks like it's freezing up. Oh, well, Josh, there'll be a recording of it. So we'll make sure you get the link and it'll be on the website in the next week as well. So
I have another seat in the laundry room if he wants to share the Wi-Fi.
sounds like he might need it.
I know
Sounds good.
Too crazy because Marian is a survivor. One thing, by listening to everything, she's so optimistic about every day and, just so happy and grateful for every day. It's like almost like she doesn't mind what happens next. She could take it on. So
Well,
thanks.
You're right, Josh. You're right, Josh. And look, it's easy to say sometimes when we're going through challenging times, it's hard, right, to sort of have that attitude as much as you want to. And I talk about, putting on rose-colored glasses just for a moment and knowing that we have the ability to affect the way we live, the way we see the world, the way things bounce off us or not. And, we are always at choice, and no matter what's going on, sometimes it just takes a little more work to recognize that, but the knowing the knowing that you can sometimes is, really at the tip of that arrow. So I'm so grateful for this conversation and everybody being here, and the ability, Marian, to just share your story and your wisdom and your insights and the laughter and the challenges and all of that. I'm just super excited to know you and to have you be able to just inspire some of the people that are going to be tuning in and listening further to this Reinvention virtual chat. I hope that everybody has an incredible week ahead of you. Feel free to tune in to the podcast, the virtual chats every week. Marian, thank you again, and can't wait to hear about when the book's coming out. Do you know what time of the year yet?
Yeah, they tell you these things. I don't know if I should believe it because I haven't seen the copy editor's comments yet, but they say May of 2022. So soon.
Right. Well, would love to talk about maybe doing something on the podcast at that point as well. That would be awesome. So
thank you so much.
Team Marianne, make a note to circle back with us and we'll do the same. And again, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you everybody for being here. Have a great week. Happy reinventing, and look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.